Alexa are back with another one of our season 41 Survivor tell-alls, and today we are joined by the third person from this cast, Danny McCray, our first member of Luvu, to join us. This is a big deal. I'm very excited to get a different perspective than the Yase tribe because they were losing all the time. You weren't losing, so we finally get to hear what it was like to live the life of luxury on Survivor. Danny, thank you so much for joining us, and very brave of you to still have the Cowboy star in the background.
Listen, I'm a cowboy for life, okay? And thank y'all for having me. I will watch the show, literally the first show I would watch after the episode went off, just to hear what y'all would say. And then, I won't get myself in trouble, but I was like DMing. Most of the time I had a few beers, and I'm like, man, I probably should delete this, but I don't think they'll rat me out.
We're a little more fun to listen to if you have a couple beers in you, I'm sure. But yeah, I think we definitely shared the same sentiment as you, at least after one episode. I know we were cracking up when you guys couldn't throw the challenge to get rid of Erica, but we were on your side around the merge time. So yes. All evens out.
And I'm sure we're going to be talking about all of that stuff throughout this this hour and a half, whatever we're going to be doing here. But yeah, no, it was great when all of a sudden you popped up that one time. I was like, oh, Danny listens. This is good. I wasn't expecting that. Some of your cast had come out and announced that they listened to it. I mean, JD was saying it in the pregame press, so it was surprising. And then I wasn't playing favorites as the game was going on. I was just like, how is this guy not getting votes? He's massive. He's jacked out of his mind, and nobody's voting for him. What is happening?
I will say this, which is different, because so when I started watching in 2015 as like a placeholder for something because I was no longer playing football. Mm-hmm. So as I get more into it now, I had no idea that these podcasts existed. And shoot me, I had no idea about Ponderosa.
Oh, you
literally would see, like I binge watched it all on a streaming service. And then when the new season came out, I literally just watched the season. And then after that, I was done with it.
Yeah.
So now that I'm like really involved in the Survivor community, I'm like, all right, I see what all these people are talking about. Like when you talk about like a Survivor nerd or Survivor know-it-all or whatever you want, it's because they've been watching the show and then going to listen to the experts or people who know a lot about the show, then critique the moves that are going on. So like when you get on there and you want to go crazy, you kind of like, all right, well, that's because they have so many ideas in their head from all of this Survivor knowledge that they've been taking in from YouTube or wherever they get their podcast from.
But I bet it's so. I mean, I'm curious what your experience is like, but like, I imagine going out to play and not having all of that running through your head is way better for you than like overthinking every single thing you do or like making moves for the sake of making moves. I think that's like a healthier and cleaner way to play.
Yeah, it was. I believe it was much better. Which is, if you listen to my or see like any of my pregame press internet, I have no idea how to answer any of these questions because I'm not a Survivor historian like that. I watched the show to see the social experiment, how people interact with each other, to see if people are going to continue to make these same mistakes when they watch these seasons over and over again. But I don't really watch it to like remember like who the player actually is. If you say like this person did something, then I can say, oh, I remember that. But as far as like names and going back and researching somebody's game to see if I should do what they did, like I didn't go into it like that. So I think it was easier for me not to get out there and start going all crazy and doing the Survivor top 10 things that you watch on the show.
Well, and I think JD struggled with that early on. And I know you never actually played the game with JD, or at least never on a tribe with him. But I think he struggled with that a little bit because a lot of what he was saying was breaking the fourth wall, saying, hey, like, I don't want to be that guy who does this and that. And like, that is something like Alexa and I always talk about. If we ever got cast on the show, what would it be like? I feel like from day one, it would just be like, well, somebody has to know who we are. So we have to immediately address that. And then you're playing it that way. We can't just play. And it's funny to watch an NFL player go out there, not be recognized, and be able to play an under the radar game, because that's something, especially nowadays, you really can't do. It's very hard to do if you're any type of player. It helps that you're not Cliff Robinson, 7 feet tall, or Scott Pollard, who, obviously played basketball, but it's still interesting to see that gameplay work in a season when we've seen this now since season 11. It's been a very long time that this has been happening.
Yeah, I think if you go back to what we were just talking about, right? So you have this cast, all right, of these people who have been waiting to play. Maybe they had an extra year off, and then they go binge watch Survivor again. And then you get out there, and for me, I'm a little different. Like I said, I explained that I hadn't watched it that same way. I watched every season, but not the same way some other people did. So when it's easy to lay low when you have people out there who are saying, hey, man, we need to make a big move. And I'm sitting back saying, like, why? like it's
What are we
day
doing?
one. Like we get on the beach and the series like trying to make a big move and say, hey, we should vote out Deshaun and Danny. And I'm like, well, I know in my mind that it doesn't really mean anything because it's day one and these people have no idea who I am. But it helped me out because I'm like, look at this guy. Like this is exactly how I can hide behind someone because he's gonna like cause all this trouble. And I continue that the entire game. Like you would see people just trying to do crazy stuff, and I'm like, this makes no sense.
Was there ever a time where either you got close to slipping up, or maybe someone got close to figuring out what you had done, like in the NFL, or did it really not come up until the very end?
Weirdly, it did not come up. Maybe I believe Xander and Tiff were asking me like what I do, whether I coach or whatever, and I said like they call me Coach McCray, and Tiff was like, "Oh, McCray," and I was like, she didn't she figure it out, and then she started talking about somebody that she knew with the last name McCray, and I was like, okay, I'm good. But I'm walking to do an interview, and we think the path is clear, and I'm talking to one of the producers. He's a Chicago Bears fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling him about like my time playing on the team. And we walk up and Deshaun and Erica are having a conversation. And I'm talking like super loud. I'm like, there's no way that I'm about to get exposed like this. Right. So I'm asking, like, do you think I'm nervous at this point? Do you think they hurt us? Do you think they hurt us? He's like, nah, I think we're okay. And then they never brought it up. But that was probably the closest that I got to exposing myself.
Wow.
And do you think that it would have mattered though? Like, do you think that you were in well enough with who you were in with? Because it seemed like you, Sydney, and Deshaun were very tight. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to hear what the relationships really were like on Luvu. But once you had your group, do you think it would have mattered? Or do you think like Cliff Robinson got voted out because he was so well liked by the people on his tribe, not for any other reason? And then Scott Pollard made all the way to what, final 6, final 7. Do you think that it would have blown up your game and it would have put a bigger target on your back, or do you think your relationships were good enough at that point?
I think it depends on who found out. If it was Sydney or Deshaun, I think I would have been okay. Mm-hmm. If it was anybody else on Luvu, I think they would have tried to use that against me at some point. They would have tried to use it as leverage. Hey, this guy actually is not as honest as you think he is because he actually has been telling this really big lie, which would have hurt me because I was trying to play the most honest game that I could up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was it then that really divided that tribe? Because as you're winning, that's the problem with Survivor is when you win, nobody hears from you. We didn't hear from the winner of this season for like 3 episodes in a row in the pre-merge because you just kept winning. But then it was very clear Nasir was out for you and Deshaun. And then it was clear that you and Deshaun were out for Erica. What split this tribe so evenly 3-3? And then who do you think actually would have gone in those early days had you lost any challenges?
Yeah, so Nasir, you saw what happened with him. We hit the beach. We're looking for an idol. And he goes back and, hey, they're looking for an idol. We should vote them out, right? But Heather comes up to us and tells us at that moment, they didn't catch it on camera, but Heather, she brought us some water. She's like, hey, just to let you know, it's some crazy stuff going on back there. They're saying you're looking for an idol and they want to vote you out also. So I'm like, so who cares? Like, it's day one. We haven't even done a challenge. We haven't even spoken to these people yet. So I know this isn't going to hold. So you naturally say, hey, man, Nasir's kind of snaky, right? Because that's what you would do when you first hit the beach. So I'm already wary of Nasir. Maybe 2 days later, me and Nasir have a conversation, and it's very emotional on the beach. Tears are shed. I'm thinking we're good. We're fine. We're locked in. He says, hey, I was playing too hard, too fast. I get it. All right. So now we're together. A day later, he tells Sydney that they don't need me. You don't need this big, strong guy. I can take care of everything. We should get him out. And that's when you see Sydney come tell me again. So now I'm like, no, Nasir. Nasir's done. And the crazy part about this, I only found out after the show how this whole thing about Erica being sneaky started. So everybody's like, yeah, I think Erica's sneaky. I think she's a good player at the beginning of the game before they even know her. And I'm saying the same thing because Deshaun actually lied and told me that Erica said to him that she wanted to vote out Sydney, and us four were close at that point.
Mhm.
So there's a scene where you see us all in the boat. Me and Sydney are out fishing, and then Deshaun and Erica are sitting on the boat just having a little chat. Deshaun actually pitches to Erica that he wants to vote out Sydney. Erica says no. Deshaun then feels like she's going to come expose him. So he gets to us first and says, hey, listen, we got to get Erica out. She is sneaky and she's trying to vote out Sid. And that started the whole Erica sneaky thing. Other than that, Erica hadn't done anything sneaky.
Wow.
And actually, she didn't do anything sneaky because she didn't even do it. It was actually Deshaun.
She was being honest, yeah.
So now we have that issue. And then you have the Dreamgate with Sydney, where Sydney and Heather are going back and forth because Heather felt like she, gave Sydney comfort when she needed it, and Sydney stabbed her in the back by kind of talking mess about her, joking about her and some of the challenges. So now they're not as close. So now everybody is kind of looking at each other like where should I go? And I'm just sitting in the middle like, this is like, we have to figure out a time to vote somebody out, because if not, we're going to explode. And we just never got that chance.
Can you talk a little bit more about Dreamgate? Phil, I don't think you watched this, but there was a secret scene early on where Heather made up that she had a dream about Sydney, and the two of them just it seems like they never really recovered after that. And Heather kind of tried to target Sydney via that.
Yeah, and listen, and another thing after the show, I found out that this is also Deshaun.
There's a commonality here.
I believe Deshaun tells Heather that Sydney was talking about her. And so now Heather is upset because she doesn't feel like she can trust Sydney. And she actually went out of her way to comfort Sydney in certain situations. And this is the thanks I get for that. So Heather wakes up and she taps us and she's like, hey, I had this dream, Sydney snuck in my house, stole my torch. Like, I can't trust her. I'm usually right on this. My intuition is usually right. I just cannot trust her. I'm like, she's crazy. She's crazy. But me, Sydney, and Deshaun are cool at this time. So now I'm like, we got to get Heather out of here and we got to get Erica out of here. So we need Nasir to be on our side. Mm-hmm. So at this time, like, nobody trusts each other. Nobody likes each other. But everybody is kind of against each other at this point. So that's why when they was like, hey, why didn't Luvu stay together? Nobody liked each other when we finally broke up. That meeting that you see where everybody kind of comes together and was like, I want to stay Luvu strong right before the merge. That meeting was so much longer to where Deshaun says, hey, listen, if anybody has any grudges against each other, then let's get them out now. Sydney then apologizes to Heather. Heather does not accept the apology. She tells her straight
Great
up.
teamwork.
Sydney literally comes out, very personal apology. I'm like, good job, Sydney, because I didn't think she had it in her at that point.
That doesn't sound, yeah.
Yeah. And Heather's like, nah, I don't think I can accept your apology right now. I'm like,
I'm out on that.
Yeah. This is how we're gonna leave this? And then, we break up into the merge and you can see we all just going at each other after that.
Yeah. And that always seems to be the thing, because, every time there's one tribe that stays together for a very long time, it seems like there's always that infighting and somebody needs to go. And we see it with some tribes. They can stick together for as long as they need to and just pagong the other team and whatever. But with these three tribe starts, it's so hard to do because everybody's already kind of playing a final 6 game. And then you haven't even gone to a tribal to really see where you stand. And had you gone to a tribal and Sydney does go home, or Nasir votes for you and you say, well, where did that come from? All of a sudden that changes the entire dynamic and at least you know where it stands. Instead, everybody's just got that, it's just boiling, and we can't even leave the house.
Yeah, you get back from the challenge. Every challenge you get back and you're like, oh my God, it's kumbaya again. But you know that everybody is like, we made so many plans and then never got to execute them, which made it so much worse because every time you came back, it was a new plan based off what somebody may have did to piss off that person the day before. So one day it might be Heather because Sydney's upset. Then one day it might be Erica because Deshaun says that she's sneaky. And the next day it might be Nasir because Nasir is saying that he doesn't need anybody and he can be the alpha on the tribe. So get everybody else out because he can take care of the women that are left. So every time we come back, it's a different plan, different person's name getting thrown under the bus. Yet we cannot vote each other out.
Yeah.
And how hard? And obviously, it was shown on the show, but how hard were you really trying to throw that challenge? And why did you ultimately not throw that? Because throwing a challenge, you can eventually throw a challenge, right? So how close were you to doing this?
Yeah, so the whole throw the challenge thing it came from Deshaun. Deshaun's like, hey, look, let me tell you, they're probably doing a women's alliance. If you see the people who are getting eliminated as they come back, then it's got to be a women's alliance. So he's like, listen, if I give you the sign, then that means we're throwing the challenge. We get out to the challenge. They explain what's going on. He gives me the Jordan jumper signs. That means we're throwing it. So I'm like, okay, all right, fine. So we get out there. Everything's going good, except the other tribes are sucking. But we're like, we can still get this done. We can still get this done. Deshaun is moving super slow, dragging the just to get the puzzle pieces from the sand to where you have to untie the bag took him like 2 to 3 minutes, to where Jeff was like, Deshaun's really struggling. So all right, run back, grab the bag. That takes forever. Then Nasir, who we leave out of the plan because we can't trust him at this point, decides he wants to be He-Man. So he's just pushing them all through. We still have a shot though. We get up to throw the rings. They didn't show. So Deshaun goes, he throws rings all off the platform. I go, I throw 4 rings. Erica goes, she misses. Nasir goes, he misses, and then Deshaun gets back up there again. So when Nasir goes back, he hits the first 2. He's trying to get the third one, but he's throwing it on the middle. He had thrown it to the middle like 5 times, right? And then so I'm like, yes, we got it. And somehow Deshaun slipped, and he's like, no, Nasir, throw it to the one on the left. And I'm looking at Deshaun like, why would you say that? He throws it to the left, and sure enough, he hits it, and we lose. But we were literally probably 2 throws away from being successful at that. But it took way longer than it looked like on camera.
Wow.
That's so funny.
Was there ever, like, when Deshaun came to you about throwing the challenge, did you guys ever consider including someone else in that? Like telling Nasir, telling Sydney, or was it like you didn't think you would win the challenge?
I didn't think we would win it because I thought if both of us actually participated, we would find a way not to win it.
Right.
But we made the decision so late. Well, Deshaun made the decision so late that we really couldn't include anyone else at that point. The people that were participating in the challenge, we really didn't have that much trust for. Sydney wasn't participating. That would have probably been the only other person that we told. But it was literally like a last minute thing, which is probably why they didn't catch it on camera. And then we didn't have to go explain it afterwards because they didn't know we were going to throw the challenge either.
And so why were you so confident that if you threw this challenge, you'd be able to vote out Erica if you didn't feel confident enough to tell anybody about it? Were you just convinced that Sydney and you would be able to get someone else? Because at that point, Nasir also has his idol, which I guess you don't know about, but Nasir does have the idol. Were you ever concerned that it could backfire on the two of you if you actually succeeded?
Well, I wasn't, because I want to pump myself up. The ability to kind of placate Nasir never knew from me that I knew that he was saying these things about me. So if you came to tell me something about Nasir saying he wanted to vote me out, I never went to Nasir and said, "Oh man, that's crazy. I can't believe you did that." I'm just like, okay, that's fine. Hey Nasir, me and you are good. As a matter of fact, the person that we should be voting out is Heather, because I forget to tell you. So Heather and Nasir also don't like each other from day one. I think maybe Heather's trying to do something and Nasir's actually better at it. And Heather's moving a little slow. Nasir gets frustrated, something along those lines. But the day one, while we're doing the water challenge, when we get back, we find out that Heather and Nasir have been kind of going at it. So he was down to vote out Heather at that point. So I was confident that me, Deshaun, and Sydney could easily get Nasir to vote Heather out.
Okay, so even if you threw that challenge and it wasn't going for Erica, you'd say, okay, well, who do you want then? And he would agree with you on Heather, so you'd at least get somebody from that pairing.
Absolutely. I was pretty sure we had 4 to get either Heather or Erica out.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Was there ever, because talking about Nasir makes me think about him getting his idol, was there ever an assumption that he got the idol? Was everyone looking and just thought it wasn't there? What was the thought process like there?
Man, I searched for that idol so many times, man. I would pull my buff over my face. I had a hoodie, so I would pull the drawstring in because I hate spiders and spider web. So literally, my whole body was covered, and I had this big maybe 6 foot long stick, and I would just walk down the trail, knocking the spider webs down like every morning, trying to look for this idol. Couldn't find it, so I'm just assuming that. Actually, at one point we thought Erica had it. When we were trying to vote out, we were like, "What if Erica has the idol?" But nobody had given us any sign that they found it. I think Sydney went through Heather's bag to make sure she didn't have it, so we knew Heather didn't have it. So we just assumed that Nasir was going to be honest at one point and let us know if he had it, but he didn't. So we had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah, and so when he says a goat on AstroTurf or whatever it was, were you like, what were the things that Nasir was saying that made it seem like that was okay? Because obviously you're not even thinking that this is a possibility. We're watching this at home. We know that this is something that's going to happen. But when you've never seen this happen, you don't know people are going to say stupid phrases and get rewarded for it. But when he says something like a goat on AstroTurf, and even for him, like, why would Nasir say this of all the people? What was going through your mind, or did you just not even think anything of it?
Listen, after he said that and we got back to camp, I told him that was one of the funniest jokes that I ever heard in my life. Because he's like, yeah, my uncle used to say this. They chopped all that out, but he said that he got it from someone else. And then Nasir's English was a little off sometimes. So I just thought it was super funny that he actually put that together and it made sense. Because I hadn't heard that joke before. So I'm like, this is definitely one of the funniest moments that I've had out here on the island. Never thinking that it was a phrase that somebody had to say, because when Xander first said it, I think they had lost the challenge before. So I'm like, I go back to my team. I'm like, hey, listen, even if we're having a bad day, we haven't eaten and it's been raining, we are never going to tell the other tribes that we're hurting or we're hungry. Yeah. So I looked at Xander as like, why are you giving away how rough it was for y'all? And the same thing with Brad when he said it. So I was not thinking in terms of this is a secret code to activate the idol at all.
Yeah, because why would you ever think that? And then when I remember, like, as the fan, when Xander said it twice, I was like, I wonder if that triggers anything in anyone, because who would ever say something like that 2 times? But I bet you probably don't even hear it.
Yeah, and there's so much going on too, right? Like you're sitting there in front of this place. You've been waiting for like an hour to get in there. You're all sitting on this mat. It's hundreds of cameras right behind you, and you're just like wondering at this point, is Jeff going to call on me? Like, just call on me. Like, what am I going to say? You're not like just paying attention to what somebody said 2 days ago. So, and that's just how I felt, and I don't think anybody else noticed either.
Well, and I think that's why this thing was very fun this time, and I think they'll get away with it in 42. But after that, they can't do it anymore, because if you do it in 43, everybody's going to be looking for what's that phrase, what's the phrase, and everybody's going to be scared to talk to Jeff, and then that's not going to be good for TV, because if you're scared to talk to Jeff, he's got nothing to show before the challenges, and then everybody's just like, he's going to get frustrated and whatever. But they're going to have to cut it. This was a fun thing that they could get away with in this one cycle, it seems like.
Yeah, it played well, though. It was funny on TV. It was funny.
It was hilarious. Yeah. I loved it.
Especially to know that you had heard this multiple times, and I can go back to what I was thinking when I heard it. Like, these dudes are crazy for telling everybody how tired they are and how they didn't get any sleep, like how beat down y'all are. I'm like, in my mind, as a competitor and somebody being on the team, I'm like, you just never give that type of information up, no matter how bad your day went. Hey, we feel good, we're full, and we're ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Alexa.
What's it like performing in a challenge with all those cameras and all those people? Did that not feel like a huge adjustment, considering that you had played in the NFL, or was that still like crazy?
No, you actually forget that those cameras are there. Once he says go, like, you're trying to get that win. For me, you're just trying to get that win. So I kind of forget where I'm at, and it's really just the people that I'm competing against that are there at that moment. Now, when somebody makes a mistake and they go the wrong way, and then production has to tell them, "Hey, you can't climb up that," then you kind of snap back into like, wait, this is where we are. But if nothing like that happens, it's literally just you trying to beat whoever else that you're playing against.
Yeah. And both of these are great segues to my next question. So Danny's saying you never let people know, when you're down or out or maybe possibly angry about something, and he's worried about competing to win. So what in the world was going on when they decided to say, we're going to change this, and you won, but you didn't win anymore? And how did you take that, being that your whole life was in competitive sports, and if you won, you won. If somebody took that away from you, there'd be fines and lawsuits and whatever. How did this feel in this moment? And what is your advice on that moving forward?
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. It crushed me Like it was like the final straw for me, because if you go back to how we actually got on the show, so we go to the show, we do 14 days of quarantine. This whole time we believe that the show is going to be 39 days, right? So we're going through this long process, 14 days, 15 days of quarantine. I believe like 8 days of pregame. Jeff comes in on like the 6th day of pregame, right? So we're all like, yes, we're about to play the game, and drops the bomb on us. Yeah, this is only going to be 26 days. Now, for the people who want to go into it and get the full experience, you're already feeling like, oh man, like, so we're losing a third of the experience, right? But they promise you, hey, it's still going to be great. It's going to be challenging. Believe me, you're going to get your money's worth. So I'm like, okay, so we already lost that one. We lost that part, right? Because I want the 39-day, but they said they're going to take care of us, so that's fine. You start going through the show, and we're experiencing it, and we're winning challenges and getting rewards, but the rewards seem like a lot less, and not in the sense of like not as much food, like not a steak, but like the experience of maybe being on a boat, or maybe going to do some type of trek with people from Fiji, or a helicopter ride or something. I'm like, man, this actually seems a lot different than what I dreamed of when I was watching the show. Yeah. So you go through that whole process. There's even a reward that we get where it's grilled cheese, and Erica's sandwich doesn't have grilled cheese on it. So this is like an example of like, I'm like, this is absolutely crazy. And then
wait, what kind of sandwich did she get?
It was just bread. Open it up, it was no cheese.
That sucks.
So I'm like, okay. So this is my thought on the game, like so far. And then we get to this point to where Jeff is running around this ball. He's like, hey, listen, you got to earn everything. You got to fight for it. If you want something in Survivor, this is what you have to do to get it. Fight, dig. Now you're hungry, you're tired, you're fatigued, but you're doing everything you can to get what he said you're going to earn. And then to find out then that you cannot get that just because, like, no specific reason. Just, hey, man, I think this is going to be good for TV. I just felt like I got jerked around. I was upset. And literally, like, I was in tears about to leave the show.
Really?
Like,
wow.
Yes, I was done. I started going back to think about what I left at home, why I left, the risk that I took by leaving. Like, I got a newborn baby at home. My grandma's sick. Like, I could have still been at home taking care of this stuff, but I wanted to come out and experience what I'd seen on TV. Not Jeff lying to me, because I'd never seen it happen. And I'm like, I'm in this situation to where I'm trapped, right? So now if I quit, I'm the quitter. Yeah. But I've already been gone for like 20-something days. So I get back home and my wife's like, why did you leave? Like, what did you go out there for if you weren't going to stay? So now I feel like I'm trapped in this whole situation. And it just crushed me. It took me like 8-9 hours before I settled back in. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just tough it out.
Yeah.
And I think the unfortunate thing is, if you were to quit in that situation, you're not getting the fans aren't going to react the same way that you want them to, which is like, I'm sticking it to the man here, kind of, but you're not really doing that, because then Survivor's going to spin it as, well, the NFL player quit because this is the toughest season ever, not take it as he quit because this is BS. And that was a big one for me. I mean, I ran most of my life, like cross country, track, stuff like that. If you win, you win. The reason you do a sport like that is because if you win, you win. Nobody can say, you weren't as good as that person. You beat them. That's what happened. And I felt like this set such a bad precedent for Survivor, because now you go out there, you're hungry, you're exhausted. This was the most physical, most demanding challenge of the entire season. Yeah. You all work your asses off just to be told it doesn't matter. Now, if you go out in a challenge and they say, hey, you're going to have to work really hard to get this, why are you going to work as hard? Just assume that this will be the reverse challenge. And if it's not, then hope it's not you who goes home. But it sets a bad precedent for, we don't need to try as hard anymore, because there's no guarantee that we're still going to win this thing.
Yeah, well, that, and then it sets the precedent of, can I trust the guy that's talking to me, telling me this is what I get, right? Because now every time I look at you, I'm just like, you're not who I thought you were. Like, I cannot trust the person who is literally telling us what we have to do to win, who's explaining this stuff. So what is true about this game? What is not true about it? Like, my mind was just, it literally was going all over the place. And it came out in tears of frustration.
How did it, I think when we were chatting with Evie last week, Evie told us that you and Jeff had actually spoken about it at Tribal Council. How did that conversation go?
Yeah, so I think that was a request of mine. Kind of in order to stay in the game. Like, hey, like, what do you need? Like, what do you need?
Mhm.
And it's like, I need to see like how he felt, how he thought this was going to make us feel, and how he can kind of justify this happening. And so it was more of like, hey, man, you know, you told us that we were going to get one thing, we didn't get it. He's like, well, and this is what pissed me off more. It was, hey, listen, people are always mad the first time that they see something like this, like a twist
Mhm.
like this, like bringing in
Yeah.
the idol or bringing in this. And I'm like, but it's not the same. It's
Mhm.
not the
Yeah.
same, right? Because you work to win a challenge. The only thing that can keep you safe in the game of Survivor, blah, 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 is, immunity, right?
Mhm.
Winning this challenge to get immunity. Like that is the basis and the premise of the show. So this is not the same as that one. And for the
Mhm.
rest of the show, it was kind of like him trying to say that same thing of like, yeah, everybody's gonna like they were mad when we first did the first tribe swap. And I was like, what's that have to do with this?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also with the first tribe swap, they didn't say, well, you can never leave this tribe until whatever. Like, yeah, you couldn't prep for that, but I agreed with you. Like, this wasn't a twist.
Yeah.
This was a lie. And there's a difference in those because he had to tell the audience beforehand for it to be allowed by like the whole gaming or whatever. Like he had to tell the audience as you're walking in so that we know that this was decided beforehand. Because if he doesn't tell us beforehand and then it just is dropped on us after the challenge, we say, well, did he only do that because he didn't want that tribe to win? Is that why he's doing it? And that's where it's weird. And that's where it's just like, it's one thing to say like, we're going to bring in this, or, you played an immunity idol and somebody has an idol nullifier. That's different. But when you win a challenge after being told you'll get immunity, you'll make the merge, and you get your reward, that's what you should get. Now, there could be a twist in there where he says you could give this up for something that you don't know what it's going to be, but to not even give that option and just be like, and what really made me mad about it, now I'm reliving, 4
I'm
months
like,
ago.
This
my heart
is
is
like
see,
so
'cause now I'm thinking about watching it back.
Well, and what made me so mad was there was no decision for Erica. Erica,
Yeah, of course she's
what
gonna do
needed
it.
what needed to happen was Erica needed to be vulnerable in either situation. Because by her being safe by choosing the losers, why would you not choose the losers? There's literally never a
Or
situation
like
where you don't choose the loser.
make her like bet on a team. Like that would have been
Mhm.
really cool. Like as a fan, that would have been fun. For Erica, it's more of a
Mhm.
challenge. But like when you lay out the rules to Erica, like of course she's gonna do that.
Mhm.
Listen, the only way, the only way that I think that this could have been fair is if the only person she could switch places with was Nasir, the person who did not compete.
Yeah.
Like that is the people
Yeah.
who did compete are they should have been off limits. And
Mhm.
we went through this at tribal council where Tiff is like, hey, listen, I don't think it's fair of how the teams were stacked. And my response is, hey, y'all voted off all the strength on when y'all lost. Louvu actually earned the opportunity to have this probability of players to be on this squad. They're like,
Mhm.
maybe Heather should be pissed. But
Mhm.
other than that, you guys wanted to do an all women's alliance. So you voted off Voce, you voted off Abraham. Brad is gone, JD is gone. Like y'all, this is a result of your gameplay.
Mhm.
So to me, it's fair.
Well, and Evie brought up a good point though, because she even said that this was pretty much the beginning of the end of her game, was this
Yeah.
twist. And it seems like my biggest concern when it happened was everybody was just yelling. Everybody on the internet was mad at me because I was overreacting, because I was never going to watch again. And I really did. Like, I took off the next episode. Alexa was all on her own. But I was just like, the problem is this isn't a one episode thing. Sydney's not the only one who got screwed by this. This changes every single thing. And it ruined part of Evie's game. And Evie was playing a complete opposite game of you. And it ruined her game. And now it's ruining your game. And we all know it ruined Sydney's game. Sydney, I think, is the first person in Survivor history to not lose a challenge and be voted out of the game.
Mhm.
I think she's the first person ever. That might have happened in some other random instance, but never lost a challenge and was voted out of the game. So hers is the most obvious. And I think Sydney wasn't the most popular at the time. So it was a little bit easier for the internet to swallow. But everybody, it has that trickle down effect. And I know, I mean, Erica earned her win. That's not what this is about. It's just why? Like, why did we need to go this route?
Yeah, Erica earned the win, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the hourglass was presented to somebody, and the only opportunity for them to be safe was to smash it, which is why I felt like it was a forced thing for TV. Like, people tried to explain, like, well, if this happened, then maybe she wouldn't have, and maybe if you sent Nasir, I'm like, that to give somebody an option to do that it ruins the integrity of the game for me personally.
Yeah, if the like discussion around a twist is how to make the twist good, then that means it's a bad twist. And like when you throughout the rest of your time out there, did that alter how you chose to play or how you chose to compete, or were you still like I'm gonna win, I have to win these challenges?
Listen, as far as competition, like I would never say that I went out there and did not try to win a challenge.
Yeah.
But it was not as easy for me to get into the competitive mode, right? So like I would be in a boat, I'd sing a song, trying to rap, trying to get into like game mode, kind of how you do when you're on the field. And that took everything from me. Like I was out there like, I mean, what does it really matter anyways?
Yeah.
Like my head's already not in it. Like I can't really get into that mode. So I would see people questioning like, hey, is he throwing these challenges? Absolutely not. Absolutely. But my ability to focus on the task at hand and maybe go that extra mile, I just didn't have the same type of fire that I did previous to that twist happening. So I didn't throw anything.
Yeah.
I didn't throw one, but it just wasn't that important after the twist came.
So you didn't throw one, and yet you lost a bunch, and yet you got no votes until you actually got voted out of the game. How did you navigate this, being that every time, especially in this season, they were voting out all the, Brad and JD. I mean, JD wasn't very good at challenges, but Brad and JD both go out very early. You and Xander are both there at the merge. You're both like, it's very clear that you'd be merge boot types. And yet you were on the group with more people, even though none of you are united. You don't win challenges, and you kept navigating without your name ever coming up. What went into that, and how do other like alpha male stereotypes come into the game and get rid of that?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they watch this season 41 and see that the real threats literally are people who can, like, if you can do a puzzle, if you're good at puzzles, the athletic part of these challenges are really irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
As long as you can make it to the puzzle, then you have a shot at getting the win. But I will say this. If you want to try to do something similar, you have to remember that at the end of the day, I'll say at the beginning of the day as well, Survivor is literally about people, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people get into it and they forget that, right? Because they want to implement a plan that they thought about. They want to do this. They want to backstab this person. But your ability to connect with people or read what people are thinking, how they're treating other people, know when to walk up to them and have a conversation, know when to stay away. Like your ability to kind of read the room can get you further in the game than some game plan that you came up with about, I want to make sure that the numbers are in this favor or whatever, right? Because I think what happened with me was I literally had genuine conversations with almost everybody on the cast. And then those genuine conversations led them to believe that, hey, this dude is a straight, honest, straight shooter guy. As a matter of fact, I think he's so nice of a guy, so good of a guy that I want to work with him. So you go into the merge and you say, okay, well, you got Shannon Leon. Evie was actually cool at that point because Deshaun wanted to work with her. Then you have Sydney. You still have Nasir because Nasir has no idea that I'm trying to get him out because I never let him know that. And then I have Xander because I went on the trek with him. So I'm surrounded by a bunch of people who actually like me as a person, which makes them more willing, be more willing to working with me and not writing my name down. And you listen to Tiff, listen to Evie. Evie's like, hey, everybody just loved them. They didn't even know me outside of that 1 or 2 days that I was able to get with them and connect with them and let them know what type of person I was.
Yeah, and I think Adam Klein always says, his big thing was anybody who says that they're coming out on the show and they're not looking to make friends, they already lost. You can't win the game that way. Yeah, you're going to have to still cut people and do all of that because that's the nature of the game. But if you go into it just trying to play a straight up villain, you're never going to win because then nobody's going to want to vote for you at the end. And we asked Evie the other night, because your game was definitely more hidden to the viewer. And so I definitely want to get more into this. But we asked Evie the other night, would Danny have won if he got to the end? And her response was, well, he could have definitely pitched it at the end. So it wasn't like you were a lock going into a final tribal council, but there was still going to be that ability for you to make your case. Whereas some people, they get into a final tribal, no matter how good of a tribal council they have. I always think of Julie Rosenberg in 38. She had a great tribal council. She got 0 votes or 1 vote or whatever it was. What was your strategy as you were going through all of this when it started to be like, well, here's a big move and he made a big move and now, Shan's making all these moves. What was your strategy and what was your concern as you got closer to the final 3?
Yeah, I think that's the weird thing about it, right? Because like I said, I look at the game in a totally different way, right? So when you first get to the merge, people are like, big move this, big move that. And I'm like, how do you know what a big move is? Like, you don't know anything that these people have done, right? So when you get to explaining it, like, oh yeah, we voted out whatever at the first merge booth. Mm-hmm. Everybody's like, well, why? Like, why do you think that is a big move? So we don't get to being able to make a big move, in my opinion, until the Shan vote. Mm-hmm. We split up. So this is the vote before is Evie and Nasir, to where you can call it a big move because they were able to trick Nasir into not playing as idol. So to me, that was the first one. So when I'm sitting there talking to Deshaun, I'm like, hey, Deshaun, listen, it has been kind of blank up to this point, but this is our chance to say, hey, we were able to make a big move by taking out Evie to make it 1-1. So it was more of like me trying to keep up with whoever else made a big move. And if I didn't see it as one, then I didn't think it was that big of a deal to push. So you'll see me talking to Shan like, hey, let's vote out Nasir. She's like, I don't really like it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It'll be a big move eventually. And then who are they going to give the credit to for saying, hey, listen, this guy has been saying we need to vote out Nasir for a while? That will be me. And that was my hopes with Ricard. It was like, I am putting all my chips in on saying whoever takes out Ricard is going to win the game. Mm-hmm. Erica took out Ricard. Erica won the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You said something right, like that. You're right there with like what makes something a big move. Like, is it like, I think people get really caught up in doing it, but a big move, it sounds like really the only big move is getting rid of Ricard. And that clearly is what like one of the factors that made Erica win. So yeah, I hope like future survivors think that too. Like don't classify something as a big move just because you have something to talk about.
Every vote out is not a big move. Some vote outs are just vote outs. And as long as it's that way, a person like me can find a way to say, hey, you know what? Well, my timing was right. So if I was able to take out Ricard after telling everybody, hey, this is what we need to do, then winning the challenge and then taking them out, I think that would have been a bigger move than anyone at that point. I wasn't able to do it, and I can accept that. But in my mind, that was the big move that I was waiting to try to make happen. Everything else was like, hey, listen, my name isn't getting said. Let's make sure that we make these moves in a smart manner. Deshaun is all out. People don't like him. Everybody's calling the Shan's clan. So you know that these people are likely going to be getting voted out at some time.
Yeah.
And then I'll be left to take out Ricard. Is what I was thinking up to that point.
And I think it's so interesting with this whole big move conversation because obviously a big move to the audience is so much different than a big move to everybody out there. I know like there's so many times where back in the day, they used to overuse hashtag blindside like crazy. And a lot of times people are like, no, I knew I was going the whole time. So it looks like a big move to the audience. And I think that puts in the super fans' mind when they go out there, well, I have to make this big move. I don't have a choice. Think about the big moves that are happening in the pre-merge and all that. But a lot of times there aren't big moves happening in the pre-merge and you can kind of get away with it. And I had made the argument early on when they voted out Voce that they were already playing as if they were in the final 5. However, they have to worry about the fact that there's still 11 other people on the island. They're all over there. And and now you're playing as if we're the only 5 people on the island, but you're not. And so when you're trying to make that big move early, now obviously this worked out for Evie. We had the conversation the other day. She's very confident that would have been one of the final 2 people on that tribe no matter what. But I do think that there's something to be said for just picking your moments. We saw Tommy Sheehan win the game without really making a big move the entire time, without winning any challenges, without playing any idols, just picked his moments. And that worked.
But it goes into like every season is different, right? Mm-hmm. The next season, you may have an opportunity to make big moves based off whatever twist happens or a swap or however the actual cast is seeing a player. But if the cast isn't seeing a player as a dominant player who can really make some noise if they get to the end, then it's not considered a big move. Evie does the puzzle in 3 seconds. Big move.
Yeah.
Like, okay, she can get it. Nasir's blindside, to me, huge move. I was so shocked to see Nasir voted out. Not because it was Nasir, but because somehow they got him out with his idol. and Nasir and Shan were really, really close. So I'm just like, this is super surprising, but they got it. Like that was the move that I wanted. I wanted to wait till Nasir was this huge personality that everybody said they couldn't live without, and then get him out of the game. And then it comes out that Ricard is the person actually who did it. So huge move on Ricard's part. But now I'm like, hey, listen, Deshaun, when we walk in that tribal, okay, now it's 1-1. Now it's 1-1. So we get Evie out. It's even. So nobody can say that they're actually playing a better game than us based off who we were able to vote out.
And do you think that most of the emphasis, because Erica's game was very hard for us to see, do you think most of the emphasis was being put on who was being voted out, or were there tribe dynamics that we weren't seeing necessarily that you were all like, okay, that's what's going to end up making them the winner of this game? Because Erica's game, we saw so little of. What was happening outside of the votes, outside of the challenge wins, that was building some people up and knocking other people down?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with Erica, I think the timing, her timing was epic. The time when she stuck her head up and started making moves was great. I wasn't really that connected to Erica throughout the game. I had tried to reconnect after we ended up sending her to exile to break the hourglass. And I called her over. I'm like, hey, listen, I know that we said we played paper, rock, scissors, or rock, paper, scissors. I know that we said that we played that, but we didn't. And this is why we chose to send you. At that point, I'm saying me. And I kind of trying to give her an olive branch. She's like, well, why am I getting back to the beach? And everybody's saying that I'm sneaky. And I'm like, well, who did you tell you wanted to vote out Sydney? At this point, I didn't know that she didn't say it. So she's like super confused. Like, nobody. You didn't tell Deshaun that? And she's like, oh, okay, all right. And then she goes and tells Deshaun, which is when I know that she's closer to Deshaun than me, because Deshaun comes up to me and is like, why would you tell Erica my name? Why would you
so you got caught in the middle there.
I got caught in the middle of it, but I didn't know that Deshaun was lying at that point. I'm thinking that Erica's going to say, oh, man, that's crazy. I did say that, and he told me. But now she thinks I'm BSing because she actually didn't say it. So Erica's game to that point is her timing was great. She executed at the right time. And I think that was really the only time that she could have done it. That is the only time to me where a big move could have been made. The Shan vote was, I won't call it a big move, but it was actually just something, a circumstance that happened that kind of made the four kind of crumble. So I didn't really give anybody credit for that. Ricard did execute it by turning on his closest ally, but it had to happen at that point. After, I'm sure we'll get into explaining why and who and whatever else, but it was the only thing that could have happened at that moment.
Yeah. So then why? Well, just talk about it. So why did Ricard want to do this? And at that time, were you kind of hoping that this actually would reveal what a threat he was to everybody out there? Because now he's proving I'm willing to vote out my closest ally who've been with since day one. Or is that not really how people saw it?
I didn't even think of it that way. At this point, I would say this is maybe one of the times where I played with a little emotion. I was super frustrated just because the entire game, once we got to merge, Deshaun and Shan kind of bumped heads from the get-go, right? So on one hand, I'm kind of in the middle. So Deshaun's telling me, hey, man, I don't know about this, right? I don't know about this. She's bossy, and she's not listening to us, so I don't think we can work with it. I'm like calming him down. Nah, let's continue to do it. Just give us some time. Next 2 minutes, Shan's coming up to me, hey, man, do you really trust Deshaun? Do you really trust D? I don't know. Like, tell me like what you think. If you tell me that we can trust him, then we can trust him. I'm like, yeah, you can trust him. He's fine. Like, whatever the emotions are, we're still going to be able to work through that and get further in the game. So this is literally the entire game of me doing so much work to try to keep just them two from going at each other too early to ruin the game. So I think they go on a pizza challenge, whatever, the pizza reward, and me and Deshaun go have this conversation about voting out Ricard. We think it's the perfect time. I will say this, people are like, hey, why did you have that discussion before the challenge? I'm like, yeah, 2 challenges ago, we got split up.
Yeah.
True,
So it's like you have to prepare just in case this happens again. So I'm like, hey, let's go ahead and get this plan out there. So when Shan gets back, we can actually tell her. What the camera didn't show was we have this conversation of like leaving Shan out of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I say, hey, Liana and Deshaun, let's give Shan a chance to say she's on board with voting out her number one. That way, if she is, then we included everybody in this plan and there's no fallout from it.
Mm-hmm.
They get back. Actually, that night, from what I found out after, is Deshaun and Liana are sitting in the tent, and they're having this conversation about when they should vote Shan out. Maybe at 6, maybe at 5. Deshaun and Liana are having this conversation. I have no idea that it's going on. Right. So the next morning, I pulled Shan out. We used to go to the beach early in the morning. We would do like Bible scriptures, talk about how we feel about certain stuff. So we're having this deep conversation. 45-minute talk about why she should vote Ricard out this vote.
Mm-hmm.
Tears are shed from her. She finally gets it. She's like, okay, I'm on board. I'm like, hey, listen, you got to stop crying before you walk back to the rest of the group, because if you don't, then they're going to know something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
She says, okay, whatever. So I leave her. Next time I walk by, I see her and Liana crying in the show. Oh, God. And they stopped talking when I walked in. You can hear them say, like, somebody's coming. So they're like, hey, just give us a moment. In my head, I'm like, this is going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Going downhill. I see it on video that Liana then feels guilty not about leaving Shan out of a possible blindside, because I told her that I was going to tell Shan anyways.
Mm-hmm.
She feels guilty about the conversation they didn't catch on camera of her and Deshaun saying that they are going to vote Shan out. Oh. Which is why she sees her. She breaks down into tears. She uses the wrong words. I'm not sure what happened or how she says, hey, they're coming for you. I'm like, I never had this conversation. I've never said I was voting Shan out. But spook Shan then goes to Ricard, and it starts, right? She's out to vote Deshaun out because he said he's coming for me, whatever. And then at that point, I have no idea, right, that the conversation happened. My mind is, hey, I just told Shan we're going to vote Ricard out. Mm-hmm. And now Ricard knows that I said that we're going to vote Ricard out. So I'm like, Shan stabbed us in the back.
Yeah.
Right. So now I'm upset. I'm like, no way that I did all this work just for it to be turned around by Shan, not knowing that the rest of the stuff has happened, just out of nowhere to say she's going to pick Ricard over this group of 4 that she said she wanted to take to the end. So at that point, it's like, she got to go. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course she has to go. And then when I heard about it, Deshaun was already on board. So when they told me that all this information that came out, there were already, 4 votes put on. They were like, hey, we're voting Shan. Yeah. And then they said they got Deshaun. I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's just me, Shan, and Liana supposed to be going against all these other people. No, you put us. So yes, I'll vote Shan out. And then he gets voted out. They bring the Liana thing in because Shan has an item. I'm like, well, if I say no to this, then all these votes could possibly come to me. I don't have an item. So the Shan vote was total miscommunication. Some people felt guilty about what they said. A simple conversation could have been had to save it, but that's how it wasn't that Deshaun saw Shan as a big move and needed to get her out at that time. Like, it was none of that. It was literally happened circumstance of a conversation that happened the night before, and then kind of spilling your guts, and then everything just kind of went wild.
It seems like Deshaun was the reason everything on this season happened. Everything that went wrong based on this interview. Back. We've been talking for 54 minutes. I'm like, wow, it was Deshaun. It was Deshaun. That was Deshaun's fault. And like, you were the closest with Deshaun. You're the only one who voted for Deshaun to win at the end of the game over Erica. Everybody else votes for Erica. What was your relationship like out there, since now it's been revealed so much that, well, I didn't know about this lie and I didn't know about that lie, and he was having that conversation, but still you were so close with him and it seemed like neither one of you would have ever voted for each other. What was that relationship like, and how were you perceiving kind of the hierarchy of your relationship, how everybody else was viewing it?
Yeah, well, listen, so me and Deshaun bonded. We bonded on that 4-hour water carrying challenge, right? And at that point, I didn't know Deshaun as a person as far as how he would deal with adversity in personal situations. And I'm like, hey man, listen, we can work together, we can get this done. But my relationship with him was the same as far as their people's gameplay was the same as, like, listen, you could play your own game. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, what you can and can't say, any of that, right? Long as we don't cross each other, go out and do exactly what you want to do, and that's fine, right? And that, I think that gave him kind of more trust of like, yeah, this dude not trying to lead me into whatever direction. He's still gonna let me be devious D-Rad or whatever. So there was one point where I heard that he was saying that, hey man, listen, Danny's playing too slow. He doesn't want to make any moves, whatever. And I told the person who came to tell me, that's fine. like I'm going to play my game the way I want to play it. And he is literally about to get voted out at this point because he was the first name that was popping up because everybody thought that he was all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with him playing his game like that. He can do that, and that's fine. So our relationship was that, but I also saw him as like, as we got into like little brother of like, listen, hey man, you got to like learn how to reel your emotions in, bro. This is how it looks, and this is what people are saying. And if you're not able to fix that, then if you get to the end, you're gonna have a hard time, right? And we go through this whole thing of like me and him have like an hour. We have a real fight, right? And he's like, "Hey man, it was nice working with you, but I'm out. Like I ain't working with you anymore." Wow. And I'm like, "All right, well, fine, whatever." So 3:00 in the morning, he comes back and we make up, and we just had that type like that made us even closer. Like we have a relationship to where he wasn't voting for me, I wasn't voting for him, so we knew that as long as we stuck together in that sense, we could make it pretty far. The Shan vote ruined us. Our glass ruined us, but the Shan vote and us not being able to stay together at 8 so we could have 4-3. That got us.
Yeah. Do you think that, not to jump too far ahead, but walking into Final Tribal, do you think that Deshaun do you think he had a chance, or did you think everyone walked in and it was Erica's to lose?
I knew that Deshaun did not have Tiffany, Shan, or Liana, or Ricard.
Tough start.
But when you as I'm listening to them talk while I'm at Ponderosa, and then I listen to Ricard when he gets to like one of the first things he says is, Erica's that girl. She's got to win. Like she's doing all this. I'm like, oh, so this is where we're at. This is where we're at. Like we're gonna start pitching for whatever. So my mind is like, I want to make it as fair as possible, which is why I asked the question of like, hey, all three of you explain your game, like where you had to pivot at, and it was more directed toward Deshaun because I saw him go from being all over the place to where we had a conversation. He's like, I get it, and now I need to do something different. And then you see him survive the hourglass twist. You see him survive the do or die twist. Then you see him do the fire making challenge. And I'm trying to get him to explain this at Tribal. But his mind was already gone because he was asked a question about turning his back on the movement and taking stuff out of the game. And I'm just watching him not be able to be the person that he is. So I'm like, I know what game he played. And I know how I would have explained it if I was him, which is part of the reason why I gave him my vote. I would say the same thing happened to Xander. Xander was asked a question that took him totally out of the mindset of talking about his game. I won't say what it was, but I thought it was out of bounds for when you're talking about game and then talking about maybe how you look at people outside of the game. So I felt bad for him in that sense.
Yeah, that's
tough. So I have two questions off of this that are completely different. So one, this is a quicker one. If Xander does make the decision to make Erica go make fire and Erica assuming loses, does Deshaun have a chance to win in that situation, or would Heather have pulled a lot of these people that went for Erica?
To be honest, I still don't think that Deshaun has those four. So it's going to be tough sledding for him. Now he explains it to where you went through a lot in the game. You actually went through an emotional roller coaster. You kind of found yourself at the end, even though you did the true kamikaze, which I didn't have a problem with because at that point I was like, my understanding of that moment was, hey, listen, Danny, you might still be in the game and you can work with this, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna drop this true bomb, however it looks, whatever, but there'll be something to work with whoever's still in the game. So outside of it just looking like this super emotional thing, he had some thought to it. Now it didn't work out for him because everybody had already looked at him as that type of person. But if I was still in the game, then maybe I could have used those pieces to try to get in between Eric and Heather. Now I forgot where I started.
Well, that's fine. No, that's fine. That's all I was wondering. I was just wondering because it seemed to us like Heather really wasn't doing all that much, but we'll talk about Heather in a sec. I want to stick with this real quick because it was such a focal point of the season and because it had such an impact, it seemed, on the end of the game and why people kind of turned on Deshaun. So we had the alliance of you, Deshaun, Shan, and Liana.
Right.
And then that one, it was an alliance. It was an alliance, but it always seemed like it was never really as harmonious as you all wanted it to be. But you were really fighting to keep it together. Do you think like that alliance was ultimately what cost Deshaun the game, or what might have ended up hurting? Because like you said, once Shan went, then it's like, well, now we're screwed. There's only 3 of us against 4. Like, what was your thought process on that alliance, especially as Deshaun and Shan are constantly just butting heads, and you're getting down to it being like, this is who I'm putting my entire game's faith in?
Yeah, listen, I like the alliance. When we got together, I thought it was great. Deshaun is Deshaun, Shan is Shan, which for me is fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, people are looking at Deshaun as being emotional. Tiffany's calling him a bully, doesn't like him, all this other stuff. And it wasn't intentional, but it's like, listen, if all these people are saying this about Deshaun, and they like me, I'm probably in a better position than he is in this thing. And then they started saying Shan clan. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, well, of course somebody's going to vote Shan out eventually. Absolutely fine. If we're able to, like I said, just get that one vote, the conversation is totally different about what this alliance could have done and what the alliance actually did. So as much turmoil as we had, and I think that happens in any relationship, any alliance, any whatever, you're going to have people who don't see eye to eye. But if you're able to kind of look past that and work together for a common goal, then you're all right. One vote, one vote, one conversation. Yeah. And you're looking at us at 7 with 4 people. Shan has an idol, and we're just trying to figure out how we can navigate moving forward. But that one vote is the thing that hurt us. It's not the alliance that got us.
And who do you think would have been your best chance to win the game? I know you're saying Deshaun here, if they're calling him a bully or whatever they want to call him, and then you're sitting there saying, well, I beat him. Who else, like out of Shan and Liana, do you think that you had a fair shot against both of them?
Just based off them calling it Shan's clan, I did figure that people would vote for her before they voted for me, unless I was able to do something crazy at the end of the game. Maybe get her out, get Ricard out, something along those lines. As far as Liana, I think I would have had a chance of winning. I won't say I was going to win. I think I would have had a chance of winning if it was me, Liana, and Deshaun sitting at the end, just based off how I pictured or saw people looking at their games.
And do you think that with that group of 4, putting yourself against Liana and Deshaun, was that kind of your best bet? Or do you think that, had you maybe gone a different route, gone with some of the Luvu people instead, gone with Heather, gone with Erica? It seems like Erica is pretty unbeatable, as crazy as that. She had like a Tony Vlachos thing going on that none of us know about.
Yeah.
But like if you went with Heather or somebody else, do you think you would have actually had a better shot there? Or were you just like, you know what, like this is who I'm going with?
What's crazy is as much as I did not watch the show to play the games, play the same game that other people played, Jeremy did get me with the get the goats out. So I was trying hard to get Heather out at the beginning of the game because I knew if she made it to a certain point, she was taking somebody's spot. So literally at any time, the merge vote, before the hourglass twist, is like, okay, we send Erica out. You assume she's going to come back with something, right? She comes back with an idol. Fine. Split the votes. Heather, Erica, we're good. We're good. It's no way that we can lose at this point. I was already pitching Heather to Tiffany when we first got to the beach. So I didn't want her at the end, but do I think I could have beat her? I think I could have, but if Ricard and Erica, they seem to think that the game's matched for Erica and Heather. They were both sitting at the end. So there could have been some stuff that I didn't know that was going on with Heather.
Gotcha. And how close were Erica and Heather? Were they like tight even early on in the game when you guys were still in the tribal phase?
Yeah, I think they were tight. I really didn't know who Erica was tight with because, it could be my mistake. Once I found out that she was trying to vote out Sydney, which, she actually wasn't, I kind of looked at her a little different because I thought we had something to move forward with. I even gave her foreshadowing. If you ever talk to her, ask her when I gave her the nickname E-Money, and then she ends up winning the game.
I love that.
But I think that kind of the fact that she was on the outs after that kind of pushed her a little closer to Heather.
Got it. And so let's talk about Heather quickly, because you played with Heather from day number one. We saw Heather give, I think, 11 confessionals on the entire season. We really heard almost nothing from her. She would come up every now and then. I mean, I think her biggest episode was the episode where she was really bad at the challenge, and you went over and comforted her and all that, and she had a couple of confessionals about that. But what was Heather's kind of role in this game, and what was the perception of the other players, at least in your alliance, of Heather? I know you said GOAT, but then she just kept going, and then you also haven't said that she would have lost had she gotten to the end, that people were actually respecting it. So what were we not seeing about Heather that everybody else was?
Yeah, so I want to say this. That was my perception of Heather as she moved through the game, right?
Mhm.
As that people would see her as that. I don't know if they did, but people would see her as that person they wanted to take to the end. So it'll be better for me to go ahead and get her out of the game. On the Luvu tribe, though, I'll tell you, Heather was a very hard worker. She was very social. The thing that split everybody up on that one was the Sydney side, and then picking between Sydney and Heather, right? So this Dreamgate thing, I literally thought Heather was crazy as hell. I'm like, you cannot trust someone who can wake up, have from a dream, and then say they no longer trust you. What if that's me? What if that's me? So I can't deal. And then Sydney, who I'm really close with at this time, is like, I'm not dealing with Heather. So I'm like, yeah, all right, well, that's okay with me. Like, I'm cool with that. That does not hurt my game in any sense of the way. I still have Deshaun. I still got Sydney. I possibly have Nasir. And at this point, Erica's okay. But we still think she's sneaky. But I don't think she's going to try to vote against me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's so funny how every season of Survivor, which you said you watched them all, even though you weren't said, there's always one person who just is totally ignored by the edit. And it's so funny when it's that person who goes so long. And we saw maybe the best fire-making challenge we've ever seen in the history of Survivor. Yes. And she was a massive part of it. And I'm sitting there going, is she going to win this? And like, would that have given her credit to the jury? Would the jury have looked at her positively had she won that? She goes into it now against Erica and Xander. Do you think that final challenge actually had that much of an impact, or has the fire-making challenge kind of started to wane off on the jury?
I think the fire-making challenge, had Deshaun been sitting next to somebody besides Erica, would have helped him. I think the perception of Heather was already there, and I don't think that she was going to be getting many votes. Maybe Ricard would have voted for her just because he was working with her a little bit more, so maybe he had a little bit more insight to what she was doing. But if you listen to Ricard, even at Final Tribal, he tells Erica, like, I wish people could see like what you were doing. And I'm like, yeah, nobody saw it. Well, that's kind of a negative part of the game. But once you get there and the Ricard's out, well, yeah, Erica did do it, right? Because he's championing for her. So you got to believe Ricard at that point.
Yeah, it is crazy to hear that. Like, not knowing someone's game is usually a negative, but then Erica almost sweeps this win.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it seemed, did any of that have to do with the fact that everybody was just kind of on board with Ricard at that point? Like, people were so respectful of Ricard's game. He was kind of seen, like you kept saying, that would have been the big move. Get rid of Ricard, get rid of Ricard. Does he get a little bit more power when he's saying Erica, 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 even if you didn't necessarily see it, because people were viewing his game so positively?
No, I think it was who Erica was sitting next to. Deshaun, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Xander, I'll say this. Xander had an opportunity to make more big moves, in my opinion, and he did not. People also felt that some of the things that he was doing was ingenuine. I still think Xander's a great guy, and they probably were genuine. But when you're playing Survivor, sometimes that happens, right? And then when you do it consistently over and over and over again, somebody's like, "Oh man, it's like he's being extra. Like this is a lot, right?" So I think a lot of people were saying that, and that's what they took into the final tribal as well.
It's interesting. It's just, I don't know. I keep saying it's funny, but it really is what they decided to leave out, what they decided to leave in, who was like the main characters, who weren't the main characters. It's very interesting to see what was season 41. I think the editors were learning too, though, with it being a shortened season. I think it was like a brand new thing for them. So
hopefully you don't get punished for winning. Right, because I thought we had so much stuff going on Luvu. So when Sydney finds the beware advantage. She has to get on the boat to go meet Tiffany. This is literally like a movie. It is like a movie. Sydney finds this. She puts it in the water bottle. She hands me the water bottle. Hey, look at this. I'm like, oh, I read it. Okay, well, you got to go. She's like, I need you and Deshaun's help. I'm like, okay. She's like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to act like I have a stomach ache, like I'm having stomach pains. And this started when the sun was up, so maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. So she's doing this for the next 5 hours. See, I got to go to the bathroom. I don't not feeling well. Everybody's like, where's Sydney at? You know, she's not feeling well. Nasir usually goes to bed literally when the sun goes down. Helps with the fire. We get the firewood. He lays down. He's out. For some reason tonight, no sleep. No sleep. No sleep. So we're all laying down. I'm acting sleep. Deshaun's acting sleep. Sydney's like, yeah, I got to go back to the bathroom again. She's gone for like 2-3 hours. And Nasir keeps tapping me. Hey, where's Sydney at? I was like, bro, if she's having women problems, you should probably tell Erica or tell her. He's like, nah, I'm going to go check. I'm like, bro, leave her. So he takes a walk. He comes back. He's like, I don't see her. I was like, yeah, she probably with medical or something, whatever. He's like, oh, man, that's crazy. Well, now we need to go check on her. I was like, Erica, do you think Sydney's okay? You know, but she's really asleep. So Nasir lays down for another hour. Then he goes back. And finally he comes back, and now he knows something's up. So he's wide awake. Wow. Wide awake. Next morning he tells her, you know, people are not going to be happy with the game that you're playing. I know you were gone, and tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. And she's like, I had a stomachache.
Yeah.
So like this literally goes on for 2-3 hours, and then which is why Nasir then flips on Sydney at the first merge vote and votes Sydney out, because they just did not have that type of relationship.
That would have been some great drama to see.
Oh man, it was like the acting that we had to do of like playing with grown men, grown people, and trying to convince Nasir that we're all asleep.
Yeah.
He's not having it.
And it's funny because I always think that that's not the case. Like when it comes to that, it's like everybody's going to sleep. Like we're used to, you live in America. It's been dark out for the last 3 hours, but we're still awake. We have electricity, whatever. Like I'm not going to go to bed till 10, 11 o'clock at night. But on the island, you really just pass out. So I always assume like they're just really milking it, whatever. This was one they really didn't milk. They didn't really like bring that drama, and they've done it in the past with a couple of these.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, wait, that's not all they're going to show. It looked like Sydney just gets up and walks out. I'm like, this was like 8 hours of planning, and then it didn't work. It failed, and Nasir catches her. So and they don't show it, which is why nobody assumed that Nasir flipped on Sydney at that vote, and actually is the reason why she got sent home instead of Evie.
Yeah, that blew my mind when I found that out yesterday.
Yeah.
I literally had no idea.
Yeah, it was horrible, which is why, Nasir needed to go anyways. I knew I could not trust him as far as game. He's a great guy outside of the game. But Nasir was playing the game, which he had every right to do, and he ended up getting Sydney before she got him. But very unfortunate, because I think me and Sydney could have done some damage as well.
Yeah. Jumping the other way, as somebody who never watched a Ponderosa, how was it like going to Ponderosa? What'd you think?
Ponderosa was a party, man. It was.
Oh, it's fun.
Ponderosa was fun. When I first got to Ponderosa, Shan was on me. What they showed on Ponderosa was not half of it. She was upset. Maybe after an hour, we were able to, get everybody calm and then have a real conversation. But other than that, like, people were out dancing all night, having a good time.
That's
Tiff
awesome.
was out all night. Evie was out all night. Like, everything's free. I'm like eating Snickers at 2 a.m. and chocolate bars, ordering whatever foods you want. I had an absolute blast at Ponderosa.
That's so fun.
That's always the best part. They started doing that. What was it? It was around like the China-ish era. I want to say it was maybe it was Heroes versus Villains, or right before Heroes versus Villains. But when they started doing that, that was must-watch TV. Like that was great stuff.
It's hilarious.
It's so good. I mean, they did it before that because Tyson had a great one in Tocantins where him and Brendan go for a run after he eats like 5 hot dogs right when he got off the island, and he's literally laying on the side of the road in the fetal position. And Brendan's running back towards him, and he's just like, just keep going. I'm done. There's no way. So like, it really started to bring out the personalities of these people when they're not starving, when they're not stressed about the game. Yeah. And so I always think they're a good time. And I think it's fun to see all of you, like when the game's over, see who holds grudges, see who doesn't. Back in Gabon, when they did this, they literally, half the tribe wouldn't even talk to the other half of the tribe, even after they were voted out. So it's just funny to see the different types of people who play Survivor and how they all vary by season.
Yeah, and I think this one for my first one, everybody pretty much after they got away from the game, like people who when they first walked out, it may have been a little shaky. But once everybody was able to take a shower, get a good night's sleep in the bed, and they came back the next morning, you were kind of able to talk a little more clearly and more at a normal level versus like raising your voice and yelling because you don't really understand what's going on. But after you got past that, it was kumbaya. It was fun. Now people are talking. You're all of a sudden starting to figure out other moves that other people are making that you had no idea about, which may upset you sometimes, and it may not. But it was still fun to hear from other people's perspective and find out what really happened in some situations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's a good idea. I'm glad they do that. And I also hope that in the future, this little pizza party they do at the end, they just put on like as a Ponderosa and don't do it as the only reunion. Because Danny, what was that like? Like having that, which we'd never seen before, but then also was there hope for you that you were still going to get a reunion as things started to die down a little bit?
Absolutely. I had figured, well, after I was done being upset, because this piles on to the other thing of the 26 days and then the hourglass twist and the wars, and then I see them roll this little thing out and it's like, hey, this is the reunion. I'm like, what? Like everybody has plans for the reunion. Like I'm going to bring my family out. I've been talking about my daughter this whole time. People want to meet wives and significant others and stuff. So once you realize that isn't going to happen, you're kind of upset, but then you're in the moment. You're still on TV, so you kind of have to fight through it. But I knew that COVID was going on, and then you figure, hey, listen, they're filming this just in case we aren't able to film an actual one.
Yeah.
So this whole time leading up to it, I'm like, okay, COVID numbers are going down. I think we're okay. I think we're going to be able to do it. I'm just like checking my email like every day. Like they're finally going to say, hey, you got 2 tickets. Figure out where you want to stay, all this other stuff. And it never came. And ironically, COVID numbers started going back up again. And then especially in California. So you had this issue. And I'm like, well, they were right, but it didn't make it suck any less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that sucks. I mean, Alexa, I used to live out in LA. I'm in Florida now, but I used to live out in LA, and Alexa had flown out a couple of times, and it's just so much. That week is fun, and it's so weird. And so like to not have that is kind of a bummer. And I just hope that this, obviously the COVID numbers had an impact on this. I just hope that this doesn't become like another like cut. The 2 things that I really hope Survivor, there's 3 things I hope Survivor never does again. I hope that they never don't have a reunion again. I hope that they never play 26 days again after next season, obviously. And I hope that they never do the hourglass twist. Those are the 3 things from this season that I really hope they get rid of and go back to 39 days. If you win, you win, and give us a reunion. Because even if, I mean, CBS, like they can go anywhere in the country. I mean, like there's parts of this country that are more open than others. It's like, I understand with the numbers and everything, but they could have done something smaller or just something. It's just such an interesting week. And it's such like a once in a lifetime thing for so many people. It's a bummer that we weren't able to have it, especially with a cast that was as outgoing as the season 41 cast was. This was a cast that was very vocal on social media as much as everybody could be. It seemed like the experience was an interesting one that most of you had a good run with. And it seemed like there were a lot of fan favorites. So it's a shame that didn't end up happening.
Yeah, listen, I hope for the sake of everybody else that they do bring the reunion back. But the podcasts have been excellent now, right? Because everybody's finally getting a chance to say how they really feel and getting a real story out there from their perspective. Some of them, a little shaky on the memory, but
fact check each other.
Who's that? Huh? Who's that? I always that's my favorite part. Is like when you get that message from somebody where it's just like, that's not what happened, and you're just like, ooh, okay, we got a little drama here, but we're sealed lips.
I just hope that the story of the, first of all, the All Black Alliance, which we never called it, it was like, hey, we should all work together. And the truth is, nobody knew about it until Deshaun, has this thing at Tribal Council where he, I'm sitting in the back like, no, no, you're not about to do this. You're not about to. I understand why he had to do it, but that really exposed it to where people are like, oh man, we had no idea that was going on. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we continue to get voted out, one by one. But I hope this story is clear now, because of course people attacking you on social media because they have no idea what's going on. Especially Deshaun, like, he knew he had to take Chan out because it was a big move, and I was like, but that's not why it happened at that point. Like, editing left some stuff out. It was so much more to it than that, than just it's a game move, or Deshaun was using the movement to trick Chan into doing this. It wasn't that. So hopefully this kills it. If not, then those people just don't want to listen to the truth.
Like
exactly.
Alexa and I always like to get our shots in at social media, and it just seems like no matter what we say, people are just going to hate. And I mean, when you played football, it was kind of at the beginning of the heyday of social media. Social media just kind of started coming up, and it's funny. Like now you're at this point where it's just like everybody just hates everybody. Was it like that when you were playing, or did you was there any type of social media thing that you had to adjust to after playing Survivor? Were you just kind of like, oh, I'm ready for it?
I had to get my wife off Twitter.
That's
so I had a few bad games in my time, and we lost them. And people they would go on and say, hey, listen, we hope you and your family die in a car crash, and all that. Like it would get really, really vicious on there, and I wouldn't respond, but my wife would be on Twitter, and you would just see her like putting crazy stuff on there, and I have to call her while I'm on the plane. Leaving the game, I'm like, listen, you got to stop. Like you got to delete the last one. This person has 2 followers. Like it doesn't even matter. Please get off of there. So Twitter was really jumping at that time, and people felt like they could say anything they wanted to on that platform.
They still do.
Yeah,
they still do. And you got to be like that for Survivor. You got to be the guy everybody comes to, and it's just like, how do we handle this? Because I feel like it's a huge adjustment. I mean, that's a big thing now, and I don't think a lot of super fans factor that in when they go out to play the game. I don't think that they think about like, what's it going to be like dealing with the social media? Because that has become such a massive part of it, because you'll get the positive every now and then, but most of the positive is coming to you behind the scenes. It's coming to you in DMs.
But we get, in the NFL, we get an entire program devoted to telling us how to deal with that type of stuff. Right? Because even today, you still see some players who aren't able to not stay off of Twitter or not stay off Instagram and end up getting released because they posted something that was crazy or made a video that was crazy. So they had to start devoting a specific amount of time, especially when you're a rookie, to teaching you, make sure you reread this before you hit send. Or go to sleep, wake up, and if you still feel like hitting send, then call me. and then we'll see how it is. Because, it's hard to do, right? You always want to defend yourself, and especially if somebody's saying something that isn't true. But you just can't fight all those battles.
Yeah, no, it seems like some of the people in the NFL have failed those classes.
NFL, NBA,
everyone's got it.
In corporate work, they all fail.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of bring this up. I guess we're kind of winding down here, but it was such a big moment for you, and I felt like the first time we really got personal content from you. But let's talk about your immunity challenge win and what that day was like for you. This was a really big thing. It was something you didn't share with anybody, it seemed like, until the end. It seemed like you had just kind of told Deshaun, like, hey, if I'm off, I'm off. But it seemed like it became a thing that was well known to everybody at the very end. But what was it like with the build up to this, knowing this day was coming, knowing that you were in a completely foreign situation, a foreign place, and then this immunity challenge is coming and you finally win this thing?
Yeah, I mean, super weird just because, you go out there, there's no calendar. I think you're a day ahead because of the flight. So you don't really know what day it is. But for some reason, like Ricard had a calendar. Like he knew what day it was. And he would go through every day. Well, we must be on this day because whatever. So I had kind of lost track of it. But it's May the 4th, right? So everybody, May the 4th be with you.
Didn't want to say it.
It's always a
tough
thing,
day.
Right?
Yeah.
So people are sitting there and they're like, May the 4th be with you. And I'm like, oh, it's today.
Yeah.
It's today. Right. So I was out of it. And then it just snapped back into like, oh, this is actually real life. This is not just the game. And then the whole emotional thing comes in. But then you also have to think, wait, if I'm social and everybody likes me, what I don't want to do is start acting like an asshole today, right? So I'm telling John, like, listen, one, have my back if somebody says Danny's acting weird. But also I want to let you know you didn't do anything to me. This is just one of those days for me. So just give me some slack. If I'm looking like I'm off, but that's not what it is. And I told him what happened or whatever. He was like, no, listen, this is yours. This is your story. Like, if you don't want to tell anybody, I'm not saying anything, which is the relationship that me and Deshaun had. He didn't tell anybody about the NFL thing, the conversations that we had that were personal. He always kept them to himself, but you would see him go give personal information about other people. But me and Deshaun's relationship was just that way. And it's still that way. I just talked to him the other day. He's great.
Yeah.
So, and I love the guy. I love a lot of the people on the cast. They're great people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. But leading up to that, I'm just like, one, I'm already out of the competition phase. My mind's already gone. But I'm like, man, I have to win. And it comes like, well, this is the reason for you to win, which is I'm after the challenge. I won, and I'm like, if you don't believe that those type of things can happen, then and you're looking for somebody who it actually happened to try to convince you, like, hey, man, look, if you didn't, I didn't believe it. It never happened to me before. And then that timing of that day, that challenge, what I added to what I was saying to actually outlast everyone else and getting that win at that moment, and then the feeling that you get, absolutely 100% real and legit. And it can happen. Now I believe, if anybody doesn't, then, watch it, and, it might happen for you one day.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. You could tell it was great, because at that point we're all sitting here and we're like, we all really like Danny. What's his story? What's the story? What's the personal content that we're going to get? Because it's something that we're always looking at as the fans. And, we saw so many people with their backstories, and this season they had the pictures and all that. And then when that day came, I was like, all right, they saved a good one here for the end. They saved a good one here. For the end.
But I'm watching it every day. I'm like, well, I'm not going to get any content until, because I knew what episode it was at that point.
Yeah.
They send pictures because this is the episode that we're going to do whatever. And I'm like, well, episode 12, was it 12 or 11? I'm like, so I got like 11 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, like, I'm not being seen at all on this show until like week 11 or week 12.
You had a pretty good run before that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, listen, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Survivor. Survivor's over. Hourglass has retired me from the great show of Survivor, but I'll continue watching and supporting everybody. One thing I did want to say was, I voted for Deshaun at the end.
Mm-hmm.
What they did not show on camera, I was looking for any reason at this point to vote for Erica. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I had some type of sense that people were going to vote for, especially after you hear the questioning and how people are talking to Ponderosa. And I asked Erica, was it intentional? Like, was the game that you played, was it intentional? Did you do this on purpose, or did it just kind of happen to you?
Yeah.
And I asked her that question, and she puts me on hold to go to answer someone else's question that talked previously. And I'm like, okay. So then I come back to her and ask her again. She doesn't answer. And Jeff says, Erica, he's throwing you a softball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, all right, well. So I say, hey, listen, you played the game that I wanted to play, low key, stick my head up at the right time, and make the right move to get me the win. So intentional or unintentional, congratulations. But I just wanted her to say it, right? Because I know what Deshaun did at this point, but I need to know that you did this intentionally.
Yeah.
And she didn't give it to me until after Jeff was like, hey, yeah, softball. She was like, well, of course I did. And I was like, all right.
Should have been an easy answer.
Yeah. Like, you can't disregard somebody and come back, and then Jeff has to tell you, hey, answer this guy's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, putting a jury member on hold, that's a tough one.
Yeah, but I mean, we knew she had it in the bag at that moment, but I still think Deshaun played an amazing game. I think Erica did what she had to do to get the win, but I think if Deshaun was able to explain everything that he did, and the truth was out about this whole what happened with the sham vote, and people were able to hear it and really believe it, I think it would have been different. I think it would have been tighter. I don't know if he would have won, but I think it would have been a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting perspective, and we never will know.
Oh, yeah. We'll never know.
We'll never know. But Dan, is there anything else, Danny, that we haven't covered here that you really want to hit on, or we go watch the Rams Cardinals?
I'm not gonna watch that game. No, not really. I'll just say this: I enjoyed. I looked forward to watching you guys' podcast after the show.
Awesome.
It was
I appreciate that.
The first thing I did, and you can tell because I was tweeting you guys right after it was over. I was like, man, hey, great episode, and not just because you guys were really nice to me, but I thought that it was really just a genuine and accurate, I guess, voice for how I was feeling a lot of times, and I know a lot of other castmates are feeling as well.
Yeah, I think
that's awesome to hear. Thank you.
No, it's awesome, and it means a lot to us because our whole thing has always been just be the voice of the fan, or at least like the fan that we would be. Just say what we want to say, and there's gonna be people who are gonna agree with us and disagree with us, but at the same time, it's like if I played Survivor, I would have been pissed a lot of the time on this season, and I want that to be known because that's the only way. I'm just trying to be the voice of reason and be frustrated. If I was Sydney, man, I would never have gotten over it.
No,
And I wouldn't have been as
I
vicious
would've
in my
burned it
post game
down.
press, but I would have never, ever, ever gotten over it. I just wouldn't.
She might not be over it.
Yeah.
She might not be. I don't know.
She might not be over it. So yeah, I'm gonna give Sydney, Evie, Deshaun, all those people shout outs. I think they all mentioned me in their podcast. Evie's great, Tiffany's great. Shannon and Liana, we'll talk. We'll talk. You know, after this, if they watch it, they might be upset. But I literally love everybody that I met on the cast outside of the game. So gameplay, whatever. But I think, you know, outside of the game, I think everybody, they're all great people with great stories, great backgrounds, and a lot of great stuff to talk about. I just think everybody on this cast was great, which is what made the season so great.
You guys had a great group of people.
Yeah.
Well, Alexa, go ahead and take us
out
of here.
I have no one to brag about after this because we have a few other feelers out to people. Scheduling's been kind of crazy. So if we do get any other guests, we'll tweet about it, post on Instagram. In the meantime, become a patron at patreon.com/Survivor Specialists. And season 42 is starting a little later. So I think like the second week of March.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's March 9th is the premiere.
Yeah, we have like a really late start. So you might have a little bit of
birthday, so it's a birthday present. Yay.
Oh, that's a good,
there you go.
That's a great birthday.
Danny's having a party, right? You're having a watch party. That's what we just all got invited to. Everybody listen.
But this was great, Danny. Thank you so much for coming on. We were a huge fan this season. So it's pretty crazy to be talking to you. And even before this, like to I don't know, talk shop, like talk football with like an NFL player is like insane. So
fun time.
Everyone have a great rest of your night. Danny, was so much fun having you. And we'll talk to y'all soon.